Hello everyone! If you ever used internet, and you have, because you are watching this video on YouTube, then I'm pretty sure that there were times when the backend, a server, was sending data to your browser using JSON format. What is JSON? It stands for JavaScript Object Notation. As the name suggests, it comes from JavaScript originally, but right now it's actually language-agnostic format of data representation. And today we're gonna learn it. So let's start with something very simple. I'm gonna use a little bit of a JavaScript for visualization. If you look here, you can see that each one of those are the valid JSON. So you can have a string, a number, a boolean, null, object, or an array. So each of them is valid JSON. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to have some fancy object notation to just store the value of the primitive data type, right? So in real life, most of the time what you're gonna see is gonna be an object or an array as a JSON. So let's look at the object. That's an example of a JSON object. Object is a data structure that has 0 or more comma separated key value pairs. You can see that this is a key, this is a value, it is comma separated, it could be 0 or more of them, and each of those values must be one of those value primitive types, right? So the key must be always a string. If the key is not a string, it will make a valid JavaScript, but it will not make a valid JSON. I have an example here, so you can see that it's complaining that JSON doesn't allow that. But if I copy that in here, it's perfectly fine JavaScript. JSON standard is actually very lightweight and doesn't specify that key has to be unique. So something like that is going to make a valid JSON according to the standard, but it doesn't make sense because your parser will not know what to do with that thing, right? So most likely it complains. So you can see my ID is complaining here. If I put it here and just make it just a JSON, you see it's still complaining as my JSON object is not very valid. So if I copy paste it to some website which validates JSONs, I'm going to see the same results. It's probably going to say it's not valid JSON, but it is. Don't do that ever. We have discussed objects, and the next one is arrays. What is an array? It's an ordered structure of comma separated values. So I will give you an example. Here is an array, and just those values that are comma separated. The difference with the object is that the array is ordered, the object was unordered, so I could swap them around, and it's kind of the same JavaScript object from the data access perspective, right? Here, if I swap them around, it's now different because the index of the element have changed. Okay, now let's quickly talk about the ways of accessing values and traversing JSON objects and arrays in JavaScript, right? In JavaScript, there are two ways to do it. One is dot notation, using the key dot key dot key kind of syntax, and the square bracket notation. Imagine this code. So we have the test JSON, and it has a string, and it has a frivolous key, and it has a very frivolous 42, and it has a dash in the key. If I write the test JSON dot string value, you see it works just as a dot dot dot, and you can see the dot notation is actually dot notation value, so I'm accessed that value. But if I try to, let's say, access dot 42, you see that it's complaining because it cannot do that. That's not legal. To fix that, you need to use square bracket notation, And the square bracket notation works like that. You have square bracket and you have quotes, doesn't matter single or double, and you have your key name. And now you see that I have accessed key starts with number, key starts with number. You could combine the dot notation and the square bracket notation when you traverse the JSON objects. Let's look at this example, right? We have the a little bit of a nesting here, and we have the JSON, which is an object, and we have the key, which is also an object with a string key value, and maybe we want to traverse it, and I will say test1 is test JSON dot string value, and then I want to access the space here. I cannot do that. I need to use the square bracket notation for that because it has a space. If I do that, and I would say test1, you can see that I have accessed value key with a space. The same goes the other way around, right? You can have a square bracket, then dot, and so on and so on. So if I do test2 for the frivolous key name, and then I say dot normal key, I will have test2 normal value here, normal value here. And now you know JSON and how to access it. If you like this video, check out my other videos that will appear here, 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 and here, and see you next time.